Hey class, I'm back with flowers on my head for your entertainment. Whoa. Today we're going to talk about Module 11, which is promoting autonomy and motivation for change. So how do you get motivation? How do you get people motivated to change? And what role does motivation play in addictions treatment? Without further ado, I shall share my screen. And let's see, I have to get darn. Okay. All right. Well, Module 11, promoting autonomy and motivation for change. Let's get a look at those objectives. First off, we're just going to describe what the heck is motivation. Second, we're going to apply and evaluate the Transtheoretical model of change. Then we're going to apply and evaluate the motivational interviewing, and that's what we'll do today. And next time on my next video for Module 11, we'll apply and evaluate self-determination theory and harm reduction approaches. So let's get started. Objective number one is just to describe motivation. What is motivation? Well, we can think of motivation as a purposeful behavior directed at a goal, right? You're moving towards some goal. So it's kind of the why of a behavior. You know, if I study, then I'll get an A, therefore I'm motivated to study. It's goal, it's a goal-directed behavior. So you might think of motivation with regard to drug use as why do you like smoking weed? Yeah, I'm asking you that question. Why do you like smoking weed? What's the payoff for you? What do you get out of it? What's the end result? What's the goal there, right? And we can just that's something that, you know, I mean, you can certainly ask clients. Okay, motivation is really a kind of a cornerstone of addiction treatment, and that's why it's devoted its own module here. It is used in almost all addiction treatments. And I want you to think of motivation here as a continuum, a readiness to change. And why I say that is because motivation is often thought of as either you have it or you don't. So I'm motivated or I'm not. But that's not the way we think about it in addiction treatment or motivation in psychology in general. So even if you're not doing anything, we think of you as having motivation, right? Because you have motivation to do nothing at the very least. So we can think of motivation in addiction treatment on this continuum of readiness to change, where you go from not ready to change and you go absolutely changing, you know, I mean, you're taking action to change. And so, as I mentioned, almost all therapies are going to have some kind of motivation based components. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the essential aspects of motivation techniques, and then we'll get into some of the individual techniques and models out there. One is there isn't a single source of motivation. There's lots of you'll have lots of different goals. I mean, for example, even in terms of smoking weed, you might have a bunch of different goals. But also the sources of motivation are coming from a lot of different places. So you may get motivated by something that your mom says. There may be also internal factors that are motivating you, right? Maybe you're good at something, so therefore you're motivated to do it. So motivation comes from a lot of different places. There's no single source. The therapist or provider cannot cause motivation or even increase motivation, but they can facilitate the increase in motivation, right? So you can't increase my motivation, but you might be able to sort of help me increase my motivation is the idea. Another thing is that knowing does not equal doing. So if I say, well, I know, and I'll tell you this right now, I know that nicotine use is bad for me. That doesn't mean I'm going to change it. I know that I should change it. That still doesn't mean I'm changing it. You know what I mean? Although I'll tell you where I am on this nicotine thing as we get into Transtheoretical theory. Okay, motivation is a continuum. As I mentioned, it's not binary. It's not either motivated or unmotivated. It is all a continuum going from no motivation all the way up to very high motivation. You can be anywhere in that continuum. Okay, well, there's 3 motivational techniques that we're going to talk about in this module. And as I mentioned, I'm only going to talk about the first 2 this time, and then we'll hit the next one in the last video. So first, Transtheoretical model, motivational interviewing, and self-determination theory. So let's take a look first at the Transtheoretical model. Okay, so the model is over here, and there's in red, and then there's some sort of explanation of it in blue. So I want to just familiarize you with the model first. At first, so this is the stages of change, whether the person is ready to make a change. For example, let's say that, am I ready to stop using nicotine? As you may remember, I'm addicted to nicotine gum. I know it's weird. Pre-contemplation phase, I would just say, no, I'm not stopping it. I love this gum. This is like my life. I mean, it's that important to me. I don't even think about stopping. I don't even think about stopping. That's not where I am. Contemplation is like, okay, I'm thinking about it. This is actually where I am. I've not gotten any further than that recently. But since I started out this class in pre-contemplation, now I'm in contemplation, because teaching this class is kind of, well, made me think about it a little bit more. Okay, so next comes preparation, and that's where you actually prepare and make a plan, and I say, okay, starting on Monday, I'm going to do X, X, and X, right? I haven't done it yet, but I'm preparing and I'm planning for it. Then finally, action is doing it, and maintenance is keeping going. Now, at any point along the way, you can get relapse. Relapse is not really a stage in this stages of change. But it does happen frequently, and you have to go back then to an earlier stage. So relapse, probably, given how common it is, it just simply needs to be expected in any of these models. Okay, so let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So pre-contemplation would be like, no need to change. I'm fine. I'm not causing any problem. I don't have any problem. Okay, I don't intend to change anytime soon. Some of you may remember Amy Winehouse's song, "Try to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no." That's pre-contemplation. Contemplation is, maybe I need to make a change. I love nicotine. Don't get me wrong. I freaking love nicotine. Okay. But it is really expensive, and it's hurting my teeth, and blah, blah, blah. There's ambivalence. I love it. I hate it. I love it. I hate it. I love it. I hate it. Remember, thinking about this is not doing it. Contemplation can be a long time. You can be in contemplation for like a real long time. Preparation is actually creating a plan. And this is a big hurdle to get over. Allocating time and energy, and recognizing that it's going to be hard, and here's how I'm going to take care of myself during that time, things like that. Action is when you go public, you just make an investment and you actually do it. Action is doing, right? You actually put the plan in place. And then the maintenance is that new behavior lasting for some time, right? And again, relapse can happen at any point in this process, and you may go back to an earlier stage. Okay. So one way that people assess a client's motivation in therapy is to use what we call the contemplation ladder. And that's where you say, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is you're absolutely not quitting, you have no thoughts of quitting, and 10 is you're actually taking action to quit, where are you on that ladder? And that allows the client to sort of self-assess. And yeah, I'm trying to think where I am on that ladder. I might be 2 or 3. Not very high. Okay. Clinical application. Now, why is this useful? Because it's really, it's all it does. It doesn't really say the how or why of the addiction. It just says sort of like, where are you on this change process? The clinical application is that it is really important to assess the client's stage of change and then match that intervention to that stage. Because what happens a lot of times, if you don't, accept that change is sort of this continual process or this long, gradual process, that you assume that everybody is in the action stage. And for somebody to talk to me about, okay, well, what are you going to do? When are you going to quit? I'm going to be panicked because I'm totally not there yet. You know what I mean? That's going to feel really like you're putting some orders on me or something like that. So if you can assess where the client is at, then you can move one stage at a time and get them a little bit closer, a little bit closer. And as I mentioned before, you're going to want to anticipate relapse and then a recycling through the stages. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the contributions and criticisms to the Transtheoretical model. Is commonly used and accepted, and part of the reason why it is, and I think you'll probably get this with yourself, it can be used for anything you want to make a change on, by the way. If you want to make a change in your diet, to your exercise, or something like that, you can think of yourself as, where am I on that ladder? It's simple. And it makes sense. It makes sense not only to the therapist, but it makes sense to the client. It instills a sense of self-efficacy, right? Because no one's telling you you've got to move forward. Self-compassion, I'm not there yet, and hope that maybe I can get there. There's not a lot of stigma that goes with this model. It just says that people who are, still using are not quite ready, right? So there are some criticisms of it as well. The stages are not really discrete. So we really don't move like qualitatively, jump up to the next stage. That kind of comes gradually, and there's overlap between stages. And they're not always sequential transitions. So sometimes people skip a stage because it doesn't really account for situations in which there might be sort of a sudden jump, and that may be something like a health problem or an arrest or something like that, where the person makes kind of a big step on that change ladder. It also really doesn't account for rewards and punishments and things like that. So those are some of the criticism. Okay, objective 3, we're going to talk about motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is a super, super commonly used technique in addictions treatment. So what is motivational interviewing? It's a collaborative process aimed at strengthening a person's motivation for change. And what the therapist or the provider, and the provider could be even a physician, let's say, or a dentist who's trying to get their client, help facilitate change. Dentists, they want you to floss your teeth. Do you floss your teeth? Well, maybe there's a way the dentist could help you to think about making that change. Okay, so it's a collaborative process. It strengthens a person's motivation for change. It's a gentle guide to help with whatever the client has decided to change. So you're not saying, oh, you need to change this or anything like that. The client makes a decision to change. And you're kind of guiding them in that decision. It accepts ambivalence as a normal part of the human experience. And in fact, it uses ambivalence to cultivate change. So I'll tell you what my ambivalence is about nicotine. It makes me feel good or normal, right? But it also is really expensive. So there's a push-pull there. We want to cultivate that ambivalence in motivational interviewing so that we can kind of work through some of that to make change. Okay, so in MI or motivational interviewing, they say that you have to have a certain spirit. The provider has to have a certain spirit. So that is a communication style that's got 4 different components, and I'll talk about those. One is that you're in a collaboration, you're in a partnership with the client. You are not trying to direct the change. You're not forcing the need for the change or anything like that. it is based on, if you know something about client-centered therapy or Carl Rogerian therapy, you'll know that you'll see the similarity here, that they accept the client's worth, they express empathy to the client, they respect autonomy, they recognize the client's strengths. So it's a very strength-based therapy. They demonstrate compassion for the client. So, I could tell you, I feel terrible and I get in a really bad mood if I don't have nicotine. And, you as my provider will have compassion for that and understand that. And in fact, you probably reflect it back to me and say, it's really hard to be without nicotine for you. And I'll say, yes, it is. Eliciting clients' own ideas and arguments for change. So you want the client to be able to make their own argument to change. The client is going to persuade themselves in this conversation to make a change. So there are several skills that you want to use in motivational interviewing, and those are summed up by OARS. Okay, there's some dumb acronyms, I'm warning you, coming up. Anyway, this one is OARS, OARS, open questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. So open questions are open-ended questions that don't have a yes or no answer, right? Or a simple answer. They're open-ended. Like, describe to me what you like about marijuana. For example, that's an open-ended question. Affirmations are just, when the client talks about, for example, changing their marijuana use, or that they went for, some time, decided not to smoke marijuana till the evening instead of smoking it in the morning, that there's an affirmation there, that you say, well, you've really gotten through some of that tough stuff during the day and you made it through. Reflections are simply kind of restating what the client is saying, and you do so in a way that helps the client to know that you're listening and you understand them. That's what reflections or reflective listening refers to. So you're kind of restating what the client has said. And a lot of times you're commenting also on the emotions. And then finally, providing summaries. So after you, at various points in your conversation, that you sort of summarize. So if you had to summarize, I want you to think about if you had to summarize what I've said about my nicotine use, you might say, well, you seem, in summary, this is what I'm getting out of you. You seem kind of ambivalent about the nicotine use because you got this big pull. It makes you feel better. It keeps you from getting irritated. But it also is expensive, and there are all these downsides to it that you don't like. So you're in this state of indecision here. That would be a summary of what I've been revealing. Okay, well, the language of motivation in MI is what we call change talk versus sustain talk. Okay, how people talk about changing, or in the case of sustain talk, not changing. Okay, so when a person talks about change, they may say something like, I just can't do this nicotine anymore because it's hurting my teeth, and I need to make a change. That would be change talk. You're going to want to affirm that. You're going to want to reinforce it, right? And so you're going to want to say, wow, you're really thinking about that. And it sounds like you're really moving toward a positive direction of change. That's going to signal motivation. So we really want to capitalize on that. We want to build it. With sustain talk is like, I'm not doing it. I'm fine. Make me want to go to rehab. I said, no, I'm not doing it, right? I'm at the pre-contemplation. And you just say, for that, you acknowledge it. You say, okay, you're in the driver's seat here, and you're saying, I don't want to do it. Okay. you don't necessarily reinforce it, and you don't want to fuel the fire too much with this sustained talk, because what you're trying to get out of the client is change talk. Okay, so you're trying to elicit change talk. Okay, so how do you elicit change talk? Well, first off, let's talk about what change talk is. Now, and why do you want to elicit change talk? It's because research has found a link between talking about change and actually changing it. So if you're actually going to change it, it's usually preceded by talking about it. So if we can get clients help to facilitate that kind of talk, then we're more likely to get that change, right? So this is, and this is where another dumb acronym comes in, darn cat. Okay, darn cats in the conversation are change talks. Okay, and in the contemplation stage, when they're thinking about change, okay, they start to talk about wanting change. They might start to talk about a life without nicotine and what that might look like. They might talk about their ability to change, and they may be saying, I know it's going to be really hard, but I think, I can do it. Talk about reasons for change. And these are things like, well, it's really expensive. Well, people don't like it when I do it, et cetera, et cetera. Need to change. I know I really need to, I know I really need to stop using heroin because I'm going to die. Right? I'm going to have a possibility of an overdose. Okay, all of those are what we call the contemplation change. This is when people are wrestling with the idea of change. They haven't done any action yet, okay? But we want to kind of move them up into the action phase. But again, all we're doing is supporting them on this. You are not, as a therapist, you're not suggesting that they do anything or anything like that. They're coming up with this stuff on their own, but you're recognizing when they do it. You hear when they do this, and you can actually elicit it. And I'll tell you that some about that in the next slide. Okay, so commitment to change, activation for change, taking steps already for a change. And that last one is ultimately the behaviors or the doing, right? But in the action stage, they start to really commit. So making the changes really down in that cat part of the darn cat. If I move my head too fast, this thing goes crazy. Okay, so here's the thing. The provider, or the therapist, or the doctor, or the dentist, or whoever, what have you, the provider can elicit this change talk and then reinforce the change talk with affirmation. So how would you elicit desire? You could say, well, why would you want to? Or what are the things that might make you want to stop nicotine? What are the things that might make you want to stop smoking, right? Or cut down on your smoking. Okay, what about ability? How might you go about quitting nicotine? Reasons. What are your reasons for cutting down on drinking? Need. How important is it for you to cut down on drinking? So you can actually ask these questions, right? And these are these open questions that allow the person, give the person that prompt to start that change talk. And remember, as soon as that change talk comes in, you're there, bam, with an affirmation, right? Because we're supporting the change talk. Okay. To elicit commitment, what will you do to quit the nicotine? Action. What are you considering doing? It's taking steps. What have you already done? Right? And you may even think of things that have been done in the past, right? That have worked when you quit before, because Lord knows I have quit many times. Okay, so if change talk isn't coming easily, a lot of times they do a little bit of extra questioning. So, for example, they might use an extreme. So, ask the client for a worst case scenario if they don't change, right? And in the case of, let's say, opiate addictions, it may be that I overdose and I die. And the best case scenario if change does happen. And that might help them to elicit some change talk that then you can, once again, support through affirmations. You can ask them to look back, as I was mentioning before. Think about a time before you had the problem, before you had the opiate addiction. What was life like then? Look forward. Ask the client to envision a time in which what life could be like after you make the change, once it's all over and you're through all of the withdrawals and all of that. And you might just ask them to just explore their goals and values. What are the most important things in life? What are your long-term hopes, and dreams for life? And again, that may elicit some of that change talk where then they say, well, ultimately, one of my big hopes in life is to get off nicotine, or to get off heroin, or to get off alcohol, or whatever. Research on motivational interviewing. How effective is motivational interviewing? Well, it's got really good effectiveness, and that's why it's used like a lot. So it reduces alcohol, tobacco, and drug use, and it's got a lot of research on that. Healthcare settings, it's helpful in reducing use of say tobacco, for example, but also making changes in other areas, for example, in diet, in exercise, and things like that. So it's used quite a bit in healthcare settings, and it's taught in medical schools and stuff like that. One of the issues may be that the effects may not be very long lasting. So the kind of booster sessions are probably going to be real necessary, where the client gets back and starts talking about change again, because they may have internally stopped talking about change once they're out of the sessions. But ultimately, it's a really quite effective therapy. And I think you can actually think about using some of this stuff on yourself. Okay, well, next time we will talk about objective 4. Have a great day.